Well, good evening, Rick Dancer. Tonight's broadcast is kind of a special one. We had a guy stop by our house. He's from Montana. He's running for the House District 16 in Oregon, which is basically Corvallis. He had to come here to visit his father and sat down and we talked with him, started about the race, but then got into a whole different topic. He grew up on the Indian Reservation here in Montana, so has a real different perspective. Also worked in security operations for the military in Afghanistan and also Iran or Iraq. I can't remember which one is on the video. But this is such a long interview. What we have is a 30-minute version with our sponsors, Christiano Family Dentistry, New Leaf Hyperbarics and Wellness Center, and Compton Family Wines out of Philomath, Oregon. That is the first 30 minutes. If you want to see the entire interview, you can go to our website, rickdancer.com, and you have to subscribe. There's no cost. You just go up to the top, say log in, set up an account, and then that video will be exclusive to only people who show up on our website. We're going to start doing that with a lot of our different interviews so that you guys are getting some added value for subscribing and get people to move over to rickdancer.com and off of these other social media channels that are censoring us to death. So anyway, tonight's show, I think you're going to really enjoy this. Sponsored by Christiano Family Dentistry, New Leaf Hyperbarics and Wellness, and Compton Family Wines. If you want to see more, go over to rickdancer.com. All right, here you go. Hey, good evening. I'm Rick Dancer. Welcome to Get Real with Rick Dancer, coming to you live from, where am I now? Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm in Townsend, Montana. Tonight, our show is sponsored by our friends at Compton Family Wines out of Philomath, Oregon. Tabitha and the family, they will give you a $15 discount off your first 2 bottles of wine. If you go on their site and just put /Rick, it'll take you right to the site. You sign up and you get $15 off your 2 bottles. Also, Dr. Michael Bratlin with Christiano Family Dentistry. He believes that you have the freedom of choice to pick your dentist. He's not concerned with anything but your health, to make sure that you are healthy, so that he's very open and he wants to make sure that he has free people coming to his place. Everybody is welcome. That's his theme. And also Matt McCarl over at New Leaf Hyperbarics, where if you're hurting or aching, there's no excuse for that. You can get your hyperbaric treatment or light therapy. And Matt is one of our longtime sponsors, and he will be here tonight as well. We have a special guest in the studio. Let me bring up the open first, and then we'll do live from Montana, an Oregon candidate for House District number 16. How's that? We come all the way to Montana just to do that. That's my new open. That's awesome. That's an awesome. Here we go. There we go. Joining us now. I'm going to bring that all the way over here. And I'll push this little thing over here so you can look up. All right, my man. Tell them who you are, Keith.
Hey, hi. Hi, everybody in Oregon and Montana. I'm Keith Limke. I'm running for House District 16 in Corvallis, which is basically Benton County. Before I get started, I do want to throw one out to Compton's Vineyard, though. It's a great place, great wine, and if you guys get to go there, do it. Unfortunately, they're no longer in my district. It was redistricted last year. We'll talk about that in a second.
So tell them about your past, because you've got kind of a...
Yeah, I've got kind of a weird past. So
first, tell them why you're here in Montana. So, we can do this via the internet, but Keith was coming here anyway, so kind of explain to them.
Yeah, so I'm actually from Montana. I grew up on, my dad worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs for a long time, and I grew up in the Fort Belknap Reservation, which is, for you in Oregon, you don't know where that is, but it's all the way up near the Canadian border. And so I would visit him this year, or this week, and so he just wanted to give us a bunch of stuff, so I brought my son up, and we just collected a bunch of stuff. And then I'm taking it back down to Idaho for my son, and it was giving me a chance to see him, and I just got the opportunity to drop in to see you.
So he's on a road trip, and he comes to Townsend, Montana. We're going to go out and have a couple of beers at the local brewery, because his son is a brewer, not brewing now. But we thought, hey, if we're going to be here, we might as well get some expert advice.
Exactly, right? Yeah.
I want to know
it was awesome.
I want to know what he's doing. So you grew up on the Indian Reservation.
Mm-hmm.
What that gives you a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, what it does is it gives a perspective on culture. One of the reasons I'm running is as we get more into history, because I spent a lot of time overseas working with other cultures, but we have an attack of culture and values in our society now. And I think there's a large portion of the society that just isn't being heard by anybody, particularly in Oregon. And if you're going to have peace and you're going to have tranquility, and if you're going to have a society that's working, everybody's got to be heard. And that's what I learned on the reservations growing up. We tried to force their culture to change, the Native American culture. And first of all, we did it by guns in the 19th century. And early 20th century, we did it by force. And then then when I was growing up, we had the New Deal, right? Or the New Society, I'm sorry, from Johnson, which was really working inward, trying to change the family structure and all that. And what we didn't destroy with guns and money, we destroyed with education and other money.
So growing up on the reservation, you saw firsthand what heavy-handed government does
Absolutely.
To people.
And it was all big hearts, all the big hearts.
Yeah, they thought they were doing the
right. But the effect was totally different. In fact, my mother was a huge Democrat up until she taught on the reservation, up until she saw what happened. And then she saw the effects of the policies that she thought would have been really great. It was really Johnson's New Society, if you go back to them and the assumptions underneath them. And it really destroyed the infrastructure of the family and the tribal culture that was so important. It was really the glue that held their societies together. And it's taken this long for those societies to come back together. They're just starting now.
Right.
And so that caused her to quit the Democrat Party back then, because they wouldn't change. They just doubled down what wasn't, and she just got frustrated. Well, that's what I learned, and that's what I looked at or studied as I was growing up. And later I would go in the Army to other countries and I'd see the same thing. And I see the same thing in our communities now. The culture's changing. And so that's why I got involved. I think it's wrong. I think at some point we're going to wake up to that fact, and we got to have alternatives, and we've got to have movements going where it presents some all their alternatives to people to go to.
So your dad worked for the BIA?
Yep, he was a BIA.
So the BIA, and correct me if I'm wrong, so that was the Bureau of Indian Affairs came in,
right, and
really tried to make people assimilate.
Yes. Yep.
And so did your dad see that was not working?
Well, he changed. I mean, initially when he came in, he was, big heart, going to go out and save the world. And they were trying to change them to farming at that time. And this was even in the 60s. And they've been trying to do that for 80 years, by that time. But the problem is the whole fiber of what they thought was important as people,
right,
wasn't farming. And we in the West tried to force them through religion, right, and also through economic means, which is farming, to try to force them into that box. And it just didn't work. And it wasn't working even in the 60s. So it even changed him and his approach.
So how are we still doing that today, do you think? How do you see that still happening?
Well, what happened in the 70s and the 80s, and the American Indian movement was a big push for this, it caused kind of a hands-off approach. And it caused the government to, okay, back off and let the societies try to figure out how they're going to fit in to the new world. And they're still wrestling it. If you go into any reservations, they're still wrestling with that. But they're slowly evolving. They're finding their niche in the world. But it's got to be them that figures out how to do that, not an outside culture forcing them into that box.
So is that what you see kind of the white culture doing to Black America, to Latino America, to...
Well, yeah, exactly. For instance, in Corvallis, we have 16% of the population in Corvallis are Latino. Well, the liberal side or the Democrat side, and most of them are probably registered Democrats because that's been the force. But the problem is, again, the people I talk to are getting very frustrated because they feel like their social values, the family particularly, their religious values, those things from Catholicism or whatever religion they came from, or the country that came from, those values are being totally ignored. And they're worried about their kids because their kids aren't getting, they're given, like, I call them lickies and chewies. The government gives them little things, a little bit of money here and, welfare there and a little bit, but they're not giving them the opportunities they need to become part of the society. And their culture that they came from is not being allowed to be part of the melting pot because their family are in it, right? And their religious base.
So we can say it, and we preach it that we're doing this.
Right.
But the reality is we're doing it from almost the same thing we did to the Native Americans. Here's the white man way we do it. Instead of going, what's the Native way to do it? So instead of going, what's the Latino way?
Yeah.
What's the Black culture way?
Right.
We're going in and being do-gooders with probably good hearts.
Yeah, absolutely.
We shove this, and people are like, this doesn't, this,
Yeah.
and it's caught up with them.
Yes. And, you know, we're saying here's the progressive way, right? Here's the
Which I question. The word progressive means you're moving on, moving to a better place. And I'm seeing all this progressive being very regressive.
Well, you got to remember, you know, when we came over, everything we were teaching the Indians was going to be progressive, right? The religion and industry and all that. So
to make them better.
To make
people.
them better people,
right?
To the point where we would separate kids from the family. And then when we put them back together, we would destroy the family because we give incentives for the husband to leave the wife. They'd get more welfare that way. Just bad policy, great intentions, but really bad results. But we see the same thing I see the same thing within the communities, even in Corvallis. 47, they redistricted, they gerrymandered the district last year.
Which, yeah, and you guys, if you don't know what that means, it's when one party really tips the scale. I even heard an interview where DeFazio said on the 4th district, well, I think we've redistricted enough so that now that it's going to be okay, I can step down and some other Democrat will
Right,
see.
exactly.
I mean, nobody hides it, and yet it happens all the time anyway. Go ahead.
Well, my competitor, the Democrat, is a guy by the name of Dan Rayfield. He's the chairman of the House of the Assembly, the State Assembly. Probably a smart guy, young guy, very young, probably a really great guy. I don't know. I mean, probably means really well, but they want to make sure he stays in power for their agenda to continue on. So what they did is they redistricted the district, which was basically Benton County. So now it's 48% Democrat registered, 16% Republican, 35% non-affiliated, and then 4% independent, and the rest are all kind of the last 2.5%. And they did that obviously intentionally,
right,
to get him reelected,
right,
without having to put.
It doesn't matter what the voice of the people is; it's get your party in.
Right, and how they did that is they broke off Philomath. Oh, by the way, and that's where Compton's Vineyard is, and that was
They took Philomath out of that House District 16.
And they took the conservative parts of Albany out and mixed it with going north towards a more liberal place, so it then equalizes what is now Albany.
What's interesting about the redistricting too is some group, a really liberal group out of the East Coast did a study, and they said Oregon's was totally unfair.
Yeah.
And yet everything you hear out of Salem and all the people around the Democratic Party, this was no, it was fair. I mean, it's just, when you got think tanks outside the area saying, you guys really screwed this up.
Yeah, when you get into the details, and frankly, if I were them, I'd do the same thing.
Right.
I mean, if I wanted to keep in power, I would do the exact same thing. But it doesn't represent the people.
So I'm going to run a couple of commercials here real fast. And then when we come back, you served in Afghanistan?
Yes.
So I want to find out what you saw in Afghanistan, how America did the same thing.
Exactly.
So let's get a couple of commercials up here real quick.
Pinot Noirs are best between 6 and 8 years. They're kind of their prime. And this is our 2016 Llewellyn Pinot Noir. So in our tasting room, we're on our 2016, which is kind of a treat to get to taste that old of a vintage. And this is our Old Vine Collector Series. And then we do have our Garden Series wines too. So 2 different price points. This is the higher tier, and this is the, I say an economical tier, but also just a lovely wine. This is mainly that's out there nationally distributed is our Garden Series wines. And
again, if you guys go to Compton Family Wines /Rick, you'll get $15 off your first 2 bottles of wine. So talk to me about Afghanistan. So you served, what did you serve in?
Well, so I retired out of the military in 2007 as lieutenant colonel. And I've been in Iraq, and I hadn't really been in Afghanistan, but I always wanted to go to Afghanistan. So I ended up contracting as an advisor for the Afghan Army. And then I ended up staying there for 14 years in all different capacities. Basically intelligence advising, we were building capacity. And so what I found in Afghanistan more than anything else was that we represented a very small government that was very progressive, and their vision was to evolve Afghanistan into a social welfare state. But the army that we were using to help them, the recruits all came from half of the country that under the Taliban had been oppressed by tribal and basically the type of Islam. They're all Islamic. It's just the fiqh of Islam, the fiqh being the jurisprudence, how they practice the law. Okay, right? It's different amongst all the different tribes. And so you had the big group down below, which are the Pashto and the Deoband and Hanafis. That's the recruiting base from the Taliban. Well, they were basically taking on all the minorities, and that was the Taliban movement, and they were winning. When we went in, the minorities, tribes who practice different faiths, we helped unite them against the Taliban. Okay. And then we joined them as the army and the security forces to the government. But the government values didn't represent the army that we were using to fight the Taliban.
Really? So
we became the glue between the two. And so if you look at the Constitution, which was at best academically, you could call it a negotiation between the progressive welfare system, which was the United Nations Bill of Human Rights, and Islam. And what they put Islamic, words and a little bit of fluff around it, but it was really a progressive welfare state. And so it never really was adopted by the majority of the population as the values they wanted to live by. So the war really became one group of tribes with an Islamic fiqh fighting another group of tribes with an Islamic fiqh for the power, with the government being the guys who are getting all the money from the outside and distributing it. Wow. That's what it became in my mind, right? Well, from an institutional point of view, from the U.S. point of view, it became very defensive, right? Because institutions, they're trying to put their heart and soul into this, and they want to make it work. The NATO wants to make it work because if you're going to produce this progressive state that's going to fit into the new engagement with the rest of the world, you got to get them off. In their mind, you got to get them off the tribal Islamic values, and you need to get them more towards an industrialized nation state, progressive welfare state. So we were trying to force them towards that.
So isn't that? And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't mind being stupid. I love getting educated. Isn't that the same thing we did to
it's the same thing.
The Native Americans here?
Yeah.
So we realize that it's wrong to do it to the Native Americans, but we go into Afghanistan.
Yeah, it's like we forgot all those lessons.
And we're still doing the same thing to the Latino culture. We're still doing the same thing to the Black culture.
Yeah.
We're trying to pretend like we're giving you this great opportunity, but we're really trying to make you like us.
Right. As opposed to going, here's a big...
We have an idea. We want a social state, the progressive.
Right.
And we're going to push you into this place because it's going to be good for you.
Right. Well, and to do that, we got to do several things. We got to get rid of religion. That's an old Marxist theory. That comes, and
right.
that's why the...
That's the same thing that's going on in our country today?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so if you look at, you got to get...
So do you separate, is that the code, is that the theme, like as a military people, to go in and you divide and separate?
No, the military is working for security, but it's the goal of the architecture of the State Department. The whole, that was the international movement, right? That was more of the international goal. Because if you can take a third world country like Afghanistan and bring it into a place where you've kind of pushed aside the tribal and Islamic values as being the predominant and in place a more progressive international view, and if that's successful, then you found the success, that's the key to success on whatever you do in the world. And that's how you help bring the whole world, I guess, into peace and harmony.
Is that possible?
It's the people that have to decide to evolve. Our culture, we evolved. We have. If you go to we started where we still had slavery in our Constitution. But we built a system, and it was the Bill of Rights to be was the most important part, because it's an agreement between individuals and the supreme power, where the individual authorities or rights were actually the part of the values that, even though at that particular time we did some horrible things to people, and I got that, but those were the values that allowed us to evolve out of that. It allowed us to go all the way through Civil War, where a third of our population basically suffered. And so it was that system of values that were created for this country that became our culture that allowed us to evolve out of that to where now, in the 70s and 80s, the big thing was diversity, right? Bring everything together. And I'm all for diversity, but it still has to be under a common theme. And the common theme was every individual was equal, right? Period, regardless of anything.
Right.
And by the way, there were some laws that are they're natural laws, right? So not everything is a man-made construct. And some of those are truths, right? And you have to have truths.
So hold that thought for a second.
Okay.
I love to talk about truth. Let's get 2 more advertisers in here. Matt McCarl.
Hello everybody, Matt McCarl with New Leaf Hyperbarics and Wellness, and we're going to talk a little bit about hyperbarics and why. So hyperbarics, and the easiest way to think about hyperbarics is oxygen therapy under pressure. So you're breathing oxygen from one of our concentrators, and then you're in this nice vessel right here. It's rather large, room enough for 2 grown adults actually, once it's fully inflated. In here you're 10 feet below sea level, which allows us to put 4 times the amount of oxygen in your body. And since oxygen is a natural anti-inflammatory, detoxifier, immune booster, stem cell producer, collagen producer, and it does all these amazing things for us, we just normally use every bit of it on a daily basis just for our body to function. In the chamber, since we're putting 4 times the amount of oxygen in your body, that anti-inflammatory effect is equivalent to taking 40 Motrin or 12,000 milligrams of ibuprofen. If you would like to know more, look us up online at newleafeugene.com or find us on Facebook or give us a call, 541-636-3278.
It's never good to have too far to the right and too far to the left. I think it's always, and that's why, like, the Betsy Johnson, I'm paid for one of her boards to be up. I don't believe in everything everything that she has voted on, but I think she's a good-hearted person. And she believes that that she can work with Republicans and Democrats, and I think that's what we need more of: people that are willing to work, actually, to be in power, and not just go extreme to the right or extreme to the left, but somebody that's willing to kind of work with everybody. And she is. That's why I like her.
Well, I think she loves Oregon, and she wants to. She doesn't want to be governor. She wants to lead the state, and that's a big difference. There's a lot of people who want to be governor. Brown.
And I'm going to say this too, Rick. Sorry, I don't know a lot about the Republican candidate, and I probably I'll know more later on. But right now, I really do like Betsy Johnson. She's just a good-hearted person that is sincere and wants to see less crime, wants to see less homeless. She wants to take care of the homeless problem, and she believes in gun rights, and so I think she's a good person.
So let's talk about that. Like Corvallis, first of all, I guess I want to ask you, why the hell do you want to do this? You're retired. You obviously don't need the $2,000 or whatever this measly little fee that they pay you. Keith, why do you care?
Well, because I spent most of my life fighting for other people's values and culture, and then I come back to the United States and I see this riff in my own backyard, and I think there's a balance required for all issues. All decisions needs to be a balance. I'm not against one side or the other side, but I don't think that you should be using force to prevent one side from talking versus the other side. And so I want to get involved. I also substitute on the side, by the way. And the fascinating thing about kids is they always complain. They always have complaints. So you say, okay, we'll do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I'm going to complain about it, then I kind of have to look myself in the mirror and go, okay, do something about it. So I want to get involved. And the issue is, can you change anything? I think you can start movements, right? I think you can lay seeds and start social movements that will build over time. And I think will bring a little bit of common sense back into the bit, especially when things fail and then they're doubled down and they fail bad. Because if a bad policy fails, one thing I've learned overseas and on the reservation is when they fail and you pour more gas on it, it doesn't get any better.
Don't you find that interesting? I find people, they yell at me and scream at me because I'm like, if it's not, we're a year into what we're doing here, and our inflation is at 9.1%. Something isn't working. So rather than just pretend, okay, so I made a mistake, we got the wrong person or whatever, we keep sticking up for these people and allowing it to just get worse and worse and worse. And at some point you have to say, okay, it didn't work. Now, what do we do differently? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah, it's very frustrating.
Oh,
Because I watched that overseas. You know, we did the same thing for 1 year at a time for 20 years. It never worked. The next guy would come in and do the exact same thing.
Right.
Even harder. And it wouldn't work for the same reasons.
so no wonder soldiers got so frustrated.
Oh, yeah, they got massive.
It's like, we're here. If we asked any of you what would be the right thing to do, you all knew. And you couldn't do it.
Well, I think there's debate in that. But the thing is, there never was a debate. During that entire time, you never had those. I mean,
Sorry. It happens.
I felt like there was a lot of us, but we were kind of a minority. But we'd been there for a long time. I was there for a long time. I worked a lot with the tribes, whereas most people didn't. I worked from district all the way up to Kabul. And I kind of understood what the problems within the society that were creating the friction at the local level.
Right.
Not at the Kabul national level, but at the local level. And no one cared. But that was the recruiting base for both sides.
So now, how is that happening in Corvallis?
Same thing. There's so much frustration within the different groups of people within Corvallis. You know, the non-affiliated, most of those quit one of the parties or the other because they just gave up.
Right.
That's 36% of the population of Corvallis.
What I think Oregonians don't understand right now is there are more non-affiliated
Right.
voters in Oregon than there are Democrats.
Right.
And than there are Republicans. Not together,
Right.
but separately. They passed the Republicans a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But this year they just passed Democrats. So that means Democrats and Republicans, you don't own the conversation.
Yeah.
Now,
No.
the problem with those non-affiliated voters, which I was one, is then we don't, I think a lot of them have given up.
They have.
You
They
know,
don't vote.
Yeah, they just don't vote at all. So now you've got two groups of people going at each other and the same thing. People have to get in
Right.
there and say something because it is their voice.
And I know the Asian community are frustrated because they attack what they see on the family. You know, the
Do you
movement.
think the movement is like out of touch with it's so loud and so overbearing that it drowns out everybody, but you can drown people's voice out, but that doesn't change what they feel.
Well, right. I mean, and it's just like the LGBTQAI plus community. I feel for them. No one hates them. Okay. And I definitely don't hate them for a lot of different reasons. Some of them are personal. To be called hateful is wrong, but the issue is they represent a portion of the population, but you can't forget about everybody else at the expense of that.
Right.
I'm not saying you exclude them, not at all. I'm saying that that's part of the melting pot of all the values.
Right.
And there are so many people that feel like they've been excluded. And in the Hispanic community, family and their religious values have been kind of thrown out the side. I mean,
you can't pick on Catholics and expect the Latino community, who's highly Catholic,
well, imagine
to come in and support you.
Imagine your whole society being around the church,
Right.
from where you came from,
Right.
and then you come to the United States, and that's still the bond. That's how you're getting the strength, assimilating the society, and you can't meet because of COVID. But if you belong to, I don't know, another group, stop demonstrating,
protesters.
yeah, it's okay.
Right.
You know, so I mean, how do you justify that as being just?
See, and I think that hit all of us really hard. I think that was a huge mistake on the government's part, which is a good mistake because it revealed their true heart.